5:47 a.m. The northern Arabian Sea is flat and colorless in the hour before full sunrise, and the USS Ronald Reagan is running at 22 knots on a heading that has not changed in 6 hours. From the flight deck, the ocean looks infinite and empty. 100,000 tons of steel moving through open water with the quiet confidence of something that has never had a reason to hurry. Below the waterline, 3 decks down in the Combat Information Center, that confidence is about to be tested in a way nobody aboard has seen outside of a simulation. The radar operator who picks up the first contact at 5:47 and 12 seconds does not immediately understand what he is looking at. One surface return, bearing 037, range 31 nautical miles, speed 18 knots. He marks it, logs it, moves on. 20 seconds later, there is a second contact behind the first, then a third. The 3 returns are sitting in tight formation, their headings identical, their speed synchronized, their bearing pointed directly at the center of the strike group. The identification comes back in under a minute. Iranian Navy, frigate class, all 3. Nobody in the Combat Information Center raises their voice. That is not how it works on a ship like this. The officer of the watch marks the tracks, initiates standard monitoring protocol, and notifies the bridge. On the flight deck above, the morning launch cycle continues without interruption. Deck crews move between FA-18 Super Hornets, checking ordnance loads and fuel states. A helicopter crew walks their pre-flight checklist on the starboard elevator. The sea is calm. The air is still. And 3 Iranian frigates are accelerating toward the strike group at a speed that stopped being routine about 90 seconds ago. At 5:51, the electronic warfare suite picks up the first targeting emission. Not a search radar, not a navigation signal. A narrow-beam fire control radar, the kind you activate when you are measuring the precise range and heading of something you intend to shoot. The technician who reads the signal leans back from his console and says 4 words without looking up. They are painting the Ford. The room does not go still exactly. It sharpens. There is a difference. The officer of the watch reaches for the intercom and informs the captain. The captain's response comes back in 6 words. Understood. Continue monitoring. All stations alert. Outside, nothing changes. The ocean is still flat. The carrier is still running at 22 knots, and the 3 Iranian frigates are now at 17 nautical miles and closing at 29 knots. What Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen was doing at that moment had nothing to do with the surface contacts on the primary radar display. She was watching a different screen, the electronic order of battle, the running catalog of every radar emission, every encrypted communication frequency, every data link signal the strike group's passive sensors had been collecting since the watch began. Chen had been the Reagan's electronic warfare officer for 14 months. She had deployed twice before this and spent the better part of a year at the Naval Postgraduate School studying Iranian naval electronic warfare doctrine, specifically the command and control architecture that connected Iranian surface combatants to their weapon systems during coordinated strike operations. She was watching the emission profile of the 3 frigates with the focused attention of someone reading a language that most people in the room didn't know existed. And what the emissions were telling her was that this was not going to be 3 ships firing 3 missiles. This was a coordinated volley, multiple salvos, sequenced, and the sequencing was already visible in the signal pattern if you knew what you were looking for. She got on the circuit to the Strike Group Air Defense Commander at 5:53 and laid out what she was seeing in 90 seconds. He listened without interrupting. Then he asked her one question. How long before first launch? She told him 4 minutes, maybe less. He nodded once and went to work. At 5:54 and 41 seconds, infrared sensors across the strike group simultaneously detected 3 intense heat blooms erupting from the decks of the Iranian frigates. The launch rails were opening. The Combat Information Center operator called it before the tracks even appeared on the display. Vampires. Multiple inbound. Bearing 037. The red vectors materialized on the tactical display one after another. 6 missiles total, sea skimming, subsonic, flying in 2 staggered rows of 3, their radar cross-sections deliberately minimized by the wavetop altitude they were holding. At that height, barely 25 feet above the water, the curvature of the Earth compressed the radar detection window to under 90 seconds. That was the geometry the Iranian planners had designed around. 90 seconds is not a lot of time. It was, however, enough. The USS Bainbridge, running 8 nautical miles ahead of the Reagan on the threat bearing, had her vertical launch system unlocked before the first Iranian missile cleared the frigate's deck rails. 4 SM-2 Standard missiles launched in a 2-second sequence, their solid rocket motors igniting in rapid succession and driving them into a steep climb before they rolled over and dove toward the incoming tracks. The intercept geometry on the first 2 missiles was clean. The SM-2s met them at 11 nautical miles, detonating close enough to shred the airframes without direct impact. 2 tracks disappeared from the display, 4 remained. The surviving missiles adjusted course automatically, dropping another 5 feet toward the wave tops, their seekers reacquiring the Reagan's radar signature and tightening their approach vectors. Range now 9 nautical miles. Time to impact 41 seconds. The USS Lady Gulf shifted its Aegis fire control to the 4 remaining tracks and launched 2 evolved Sea Sparrow missiles from her forward cells. The ESSMs are shorter range than the SM-2 but faster to intercept and more maneuverable in the terminal phase, built specifically for the threat that gets through the outer defensive ring. Both found their targets. 2 more tracks vanished. 2 missiles remained. One was flying a stable sea-skimming profile, seeker locked on the Reagan's hull. The other was behaving strangely, oscillating slightly, climbing 2 feet, then dropping 4, its guidance making small corrections that suggested something in its control system was working harder than it should have been. Chen noticed the oscillation at the same moment the missile crossed inside 6 nautical miles. She had been waiting for it. The Noor anti-ship missile maintains a continuous encrypted data link with the firing platform throughout its flight. The frigate tracks the target and transmits course corrections to the weapon in real time. It is the missile's connection to accurate targeting data. Without it, the seeker has to work entirely autonomously, relying on its own onboard radar to find and track a target while flying 25 feet above a radar-cluttered ocean surface. The oscillating missile's data link had degraded. Chen could see it in the emission profile. The frigate's fire control transmitter was compensating for something, increasing power output, adjusting frequency slightly, the electronic equivalent of shouting louder because the connection was breaking up. She had not caused the degradation, but she had been ready to cause something else entirely for the past 11 minutes. She keyed the transmission at 5:57 and 03 seconds, a focused, jamming pulse on the exact encrypted frequency the 3 frigates were using for missile guidance uplink. Duration, 2.1 seconds. Targeted specifically at the data link frequencies she had cataloged since 5:31 a.m. The 2 surviving missiles lost their uplink connections simultaneously. The stable one began to drift immediately, its seeker sweeping left across the wave tops as it tried to reacquire the target without course correction data. The oscillating one climbed sharply, a classic seeker loss behavior as the guidance system defaulted to its last known elevation command. At sea skimming altitude, climbing sharply is fatal. It pulled up to 60 feet above the water, its radar cross-section suddenly visible to every sensor in the strike group, and the phalanx CIWS on the Reagan's port sponson acquired it in 0.4 seconds. The Gatling opened fire at 2,500 yards. The missile came apart in the burst at 800 yards. Fragments scattered across the water, and one piece the size of a hardcover book struck the wave tops and skipped twice before sinking. The drifting missile crossed inside 2 nautical miles on a bearing that had migrated 11 degrees off the Reagan's position before the second phalanx system on the Bainbridge acquired it at 1,200 yards and destroyed it in a 3-second burst. The last fragment of the 6th Iranian missile hit the water 340 yards from the Bainbridge's hull. No penetrations, no casualties. The first salvo was gone. The second salvo launched 48 seconds after the first. Chen was ready for it. She had been building a more precise picture of the frigate's emission architecture since the first jamming pulse went out and their transmitters responded by shifting frequency. A standard electronic countermeasure response that told her exactly where the backup frequencies were. The second salvo was 4 missiles, Two were intercepted by SM-2s from the Bainbridge at long range before the jamming was needed. The third was jammed at 8 nautical miles and destroyed by ESSM. The fourth lost its data link at 6 nautical miles, drifted north of the Reagan's position by 400 yards, reacquired the hull at 1,800 yards when its terminal seeker locked the radar return, and was engaged by phalanx at 1,400 yards. It detonated at 900 yards. The pressure wave was felt on the Reagan's flight deck. 2 deck crew members reported ringing in their ears. No structural damage, no injuries. The third salvo never launched. At 6:03 a.m., after the last missile from the second salvo was confirmed destroyed, the strike group commander gave a single order over the command circuit. The 2 FA-18E Super Hornets that had been holding at 18,000 feet on combat air patrol since 5:45 rolled inverted and descended. Their targeting systems had been tracking the 3 Iranian frigates since before the first missile left a launch rail. The lead pilot, Lieutenant Commander James Petrov, had his targeting solution updated continuously by the E-2D Hawkeye orbiting above the formation. He had been waiting 12 minutes for this order. He transmitted his acknowledgement in 2 words: Tally 3. The first AGM-84 Harpoon left his wing at 6:03 and 44 seconds at a range of 14 nautical miles. The missile dropped to 20 feet above the water and accelerated to Mach 0.85, its active radar seeker searching for the largest surface return on the bearing Petrov had given it. It found the lead frigate's hull at 4 nautical miles, locked, and impacted amidships at the waterline 11 seconds later. The detonation was internal. The warhead penetrated the hull before initiating, and the resulting explosion vented through 3 compartments simultaneously. The ship lost propulsion and began listing to starboard within 40 seconds of impact. The wingman's harpoon reached the second frigate 7 seconds after the first impact. It struck aft of the superstructure, detonating adjacent to the missile magazine. The secondary explosion was visible from the Reagan's bridge at 22 nautical miles. A white flash followed immediately by a much larger orange fireball that climbed 400 feet before the shockwave dispersed it into a spreading column of black smoke. The second frigate stopped moving in under a minute. The third frigate turned hard to port the moment the first missile hit and went to maximum speed, putting its stern toward the strike group and running. At 31 knots, it had covered 1.4 nautical miles by the time the MH-60R Seahawk helicopter that had been holding at low altitude 8 miles west of the formation completed its targeting solution and transmitted the coordinates to USS Lady Gulf. A single Tomahawk launched from the Lady Gulf's vertical launch system at 6:06 and 19 seconds. Flight time, 4 minutes and 12 seconds. The third frigate covered 2.1 nautical miles in 4 minutes and 12 seconds. The Tomahawk's GPS guidance did not require the ship to stay where it was. It followed. The impact came at 6:10 and 31 seconds. The ship lost power immediately and coasted to a stop over the following 90 seconds, trailing smoke and a spreading fuel slick across the surface. At 6:11 a.m., the Electronic Warfare Suite recorded the last Iranian radar emission of the engagement, a brief, low-power transmission from the third frigate's emergency beacon, activating automatically after the ship lost power. Chen logged it, time-stamped it, and noted the frequency. Then she closed the emission file and began writing her engagement report. In the Reagan's Combat Information Center, the officer of the watch looked at the tactical display for a long moment. 3 surface contacts, all stationary, all showing thermal signatures consistent with fires burning in enclosed spaces. 0 missile tracks. 0 active fire control emissions. He called the captain on the circuit and made his report. 3 hostile surface contacts neutralized. 2 salvos intercepted, all 10 missiles destroyed. 0 damage, 0 casualties. Strike group is fully operational. The captain acknowledged in 4 words. Understood. Continue the mission. The FA-18s recovered aboard at 6:19. The deck crews had the aircraft turned around and respotted within 22 minutes. The Seahawk returned to the plane guard position. The E-2D Hawkeye continued its radar sweep. The Reagan held its course and speed without deviation. By 6:30 a.m., the flight deck was cycling aircraft again. the catapults throwing jets into the morning sky one after another with the mechanical rhythm of a ship that had already moved on from what happened 43 minutes ago. 30 nautical miles to the northeast, 3 Iranian frigates sat dead in the water. 2 were burning. 1 had lost all power and was drifting with the current at less than half a knot. The fires aboard the second ship burned for 3 hours and 14 minutes. By the time the last one went out, the Reagan was past the horizon and the Arabian Sea was flat and still and completely silent, as though 3 ships had not fired 10 missiles at the most powerful carrier strike group in the world and lost every single one of them in under 16 minutes. Not because the strike group got lucky, not because the Iranians made a mistake, because one electronic warfare officer had spent 11 minutes cataloging the exact frequencies that would matter before anyone fired a single shot, and when the moment came, she was ready before the missiles were.